God can perform anything. And I said, with him, nothing is impossible. I remember one little thing Pop used to say, but learn not to slam the screen door because the strips will fly off. And so he said, if you do that and I catch you, you have to come back and close it 5 times very quietly. And that's what he did. And they lived up to it. They did all right. They remembered. Well, I still think that it started there at Episcopal Hospital when I was a nurse. And the little colored lady, she told me that she had something to tell me. And I said, what's that? And she says, I like you very much. I said, well, I like you too. And with that, she said God had given her a gift to foretell the future. So I said, well, what do you see? And she says, you're going to marry the fellow that you're going with. And she says, and you're going to get married, and when you do, you're going to have one son, and then you're going to, I see a lot of children. And from there on, there'll be more children. Pop and I got married after I had finished my graduation of 2.5 years at Episcopal Ear, Nose, and Throat Hospital in Washington, D.C. And we went to the mission field. And we stayed there 2.5 years, and I was house mother for 28 little boys, and he was house father. And it wasn't until about 2.5 years that he decided he wanted to study for the ministry. Then he was ordained, and from there on he was priested, and he decided we'd go to West Virginia. I don't know why he decided. I didn't ask him why he decided. I just thought, well, what not? Why not? We seemed to be rejected in so many ways. We were 2.5, 3 years in a place, and my husband believed in beating the bushes and getting the kids. He said, if you're going to have a church, you got to have kids if it's going to grow. And that's what he did. Well, some of the people didn't like that idea. So Pop says, well, if you don't like that idea, you don't like me. So we left. And we went to another church, and the same thing happened. So he was getting very discouraged. So we decided we'd come to West Virginia and go up on the mountain and see if we couldn't start some children's work. So that's what we did. We went to St. Andrews up on the mountain. And with the bishop's consent, we went ahead and took in children. And finally, the bishop decided he would give us somebody to work with us. So he got a hold of this lady, but he forgot to go through some committee, and they didn't approve of that, so they cut that off. And Pop says, well, what are we going to do now? And he says, well, just send the kids back where they came from. He said, no, I promised these kids a chance, and I'm going to do it. So we had $1,000 and a lovely shoestring that seemed to stretch from here to eternity. And we bought a place, and every Saturday we go down and clean it up. It used to be a Jewish camp. I never saw so many cans in all my born days, but we picked up cans and cleaned up the place. And we started from there on with 11 children, and finally we got court cases. We got welfare cases, and we got a couple of boys. Somebody fussed and said, that'll never work. That'll never work. And I said, well, you don't know. God can perform anything. And I said, with him, nothing is impossible. And we started from there on with 11 children, and finally we got court cases, we got welfare cases, and we got a couple of boys. Somebody fussed said, that'll never work, that'll never work. And I said, well, you don't know. God can perform anything. And I said, with him, nothing is impossible. And I remember one of the boys who's dead now, but he was a truant, and they wanted to send him to Richmond. And they finally called us and asked him if I'd take him. He was only 10 years old. And I said, yeah. And he turned out real well, real well. He was a good football player. His name was Milton Cooper.
Mom and Pop Wheeler gave young rowdy Milton Cooper from Leesburg another chance outside of reform school. Born in Leesburg, January 12, 1940, Milton wound up at the Children's Haven when he was 10 years old. He fit in, barely at first, trying and slowly learning to cope with the rules and discipline laid down by Pop Wheeler. In the late 50s, he was a star, hard-nosed fullback playing for Charlestown High School's Purple Panthers, and he also excelled in baseball and track. But then, his senior year, he was too old to play, and it set him back. For almost 3 years, he wandered and wondered. Then he enlisted in the Army and faced the dangers of combat in Vietnam, receiving 2 Purple Hearts and 2 Bronze Star medals, which is the 4th highest medal for bravery in combat. He married Connie Cooper. And in 1985, he came home to his first home to see Mom and Pop Wheeler again and the kids he grew up with. He came all the way from Kansas City, where he lived with his wife. And at this reunion, he saw everyone for the last time. He died just weeks later of a heart attack.
Somebody asked Pop, says, well, what are you going to get for a memorial for all this? And Pop says, I don't need any memorial. I've got walking memorials. With the bishop's consent, we went ahead and took in children. We took them in the evening from 7 o'clock until 10:30 because there were so many children there and they didn't have anything to do. And we figured if we find something for them to do, they wouldn't get in trouble. And let's see what else happened. In a regular day, we just, there was a school building and we fixed it so that we had children. We had only girls, and I think there were 7 or 8, and it finally got to be 11. We had just 11. And I thought, well, that's a religious number too. So, and So we had 11 girls, and finally we got court cases, we got welfare cases, and we got a couple of boys. And we finally had to get a dormitory for boys, and we had a dormitory for girls. And they had a regular routine life of going to summer camp, like summer camp living. They got up by a bell, went to bed by a bell. We had study hour, we had recreation. Pop would take them on the truck and take them for a swim. And we'd teach the girls when they were 12 years old how to iron clothes and how to do different things. And later on, they got experience in baking and whatever they wanted to try. And most of them did want to try. The boys didn't like the garden idea, but Pop said, that's good, because he says we all have to eat. And we had what we called, after study hour, we had what we called, what you call it? I can't think of a word. But complaints, like complaints. Everybody was allowed to talk, and whether they liked it or whether they didn't, or if Pop did something that they didn't think he ought to, we got up and said we were sorry, and we tried to instill the principles of good living with the children. Then we had what we called Grandma's Barrel. We had so many kids, we didn't know what to do with them all, and they'd leave their toys and things outdoors. And Pop says, well, if Mom and I go up and pick up any toys after a certain time, we're going to put them in Grandma's barrel, and you're going to have to work to receive your toys all over again. So they were agreeable with that. And there was very few toys left after a couple of weeks, because they had to pick up leaves, they had to pick up trash or whatever we gave them to do. But they learned to work. They also learned to play. We had a baseball diamond for the boys. We had the nice Shenandoah River where they could fish, and get in a boat and fish. And all kinds of opportunities that boys like, and girls too. And they all went to Charlestown School. We had the government come in and say that we was always using, I hate to say this, but they used to tell us, you gotta have a new system. So we built new chimneys. Next time we built they wanted us to have sprinkler system. Pop says, we can't afford sprinkler system. Well, then close it up. And so that was how the start of closing it up started. And let's see, I guess we were with children about 17, 18 years there before we closed up. So we had 11 girls, and finally the bishop decided he would give us somebody to work with us. So he got a hold of this lady, but he forgot to go through some committee, and they didn't approve of that, so they cut that off. And Pop says, well, what are we going to do now? And he says, well, just send the kids back where they came from. He said, no, I promised these kids a chance, and I'm going to do it.